Hello all that have tuned into this video. So I'm creating this video to talk about a topic that is near and dear to my heart, and it is in relation to the area of human communication and the way that a person's socioeconomic status may or may not affect the education gap due to the various social connections one may have and networking opportunities made available to some families, affording their children a better education than others, and ultimately how someone's socioeconomic status, the education gap, and military job selection are all affected by each other. So I found one article by Downey and a few of his colleagues, and in this study, it was a psychological-based study on the quality of education, distribution, and whether a student's race or coming from a high SES family affected the potential learning outcomes. The article starts off by arguing how the dominant view in the sociology community of education has been a critical one, and that typically they believe that advantaged children enjoy substantially better schools than disadvantaged children, and schools played an important role in generating and maintaining the inequality in the education gap. The study's hope was to determine if schools serving predominantly white or high SES students did in fact achieve better education, and if so, how to attract teachers to schools in areas that were not as well funded, and hoping to close the education gap, the achievement gap that exists. The study notes that one of the major differences is how the education gap goes faster whether school was in or out of session, and they focused on the students in primary care, so ranging from pre-K to about second grade, and it showed that the things that made the different learning tools that were made available to students during summer breaks actually caused more of an influx and a greater disadvantage to students, and made that education gap larger. So pretty much students from suburban areas or students from high SES backgrounds, they typically had different summer programs made available to them, where they were able to learn outside of school, and so their test scores were not as affected as students from urban areas where their schools had lower funding and weren't able to afford the same opportunities. Also, something of note in this study was how the class size affected a child's learning outcome. So I know for myself, I went to Bladensburg High School in an urban area, and my graduating class was about 1,500 students. My husband, who is a white male, grew up in a rural suburban area, and his graduating class was barely 100 students. In the same MOS, having the same job. I came in as a specialist, whereas he came in as a specialist E4, whereas he came in as a PV2, private E2, because I had my degree. So I came in at a higher pay grade than he did. In conclusion, the study found that the achievement gap seemed to be something that was more so affected by the society in which a child lived and the learning opportunities that were made available to them when school was not in session. So I gave an example of a real-world application by using my husband's educational background and his school size versus my educational background and my school size, where we decided to go as far as higher education level achieved were concerned. And as far as this article is concerned, in arguing my standpoint that I do believe that the achievement gap does affect opportunities made to those in job selection, specifically those when selecting jobs in the military. I do believe that the education gap and achievement gap has something to do with that, and ultimately the way that a person is able to network through their socioeconomic status and the different venues that are made available to them through their higher education does ultimately have an effect on the jobs made available to those when they join the military. So this article, while it does have some strong points and it does have some weaknesses, it sort of supports my argument. And I would give this about a 3-star rating out of 5 as far as how useful this article would be to my own essay.